Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Renate McNay and my guest today is Tess Hughes. Hello, Tess.
Hi, Renate.
Tess arrived this morning from Ireland, that's where she lives, to just come and visit us here and do the interview, which is wonderful. Thank you, Tess. So, Tess, you were born into quite a big Irish Catholic family. I think you had 9 brothers and sisters.
Well, 9 children in the family.
9 children.
And I'm number 2.
Okay. And it was, your parents were farmers.
Yes.
And you had your first existential crisis when you were 8 years old.
Yeah, about 8 or 9. I was quite young.
Yeah, so what happened?
Well, living on a farm, there were always calves and being born and pigs and chickens and, new life coming all the time.
Yes.
And in our house, there was a baby every year or 2 years. All the neighbours were having babies. So there was a constant new life coming. Yeah. And I did know that older people and older animals died. But I thought, that's just the way nature goes. You get born, you live your whole life, and when you're fed up living or you're old enough, then you're very happy to die. And that's the way the world functions. And one day, one of our calves died. And I was really shocked by this because my world order was shattered. I didn't know this could even happen. And then it struck me, well, if a calf could die, a child could die. If a child could die, then I could die. And I could die any time. And I was really shocked by this. I was really upset by it. And I went and I checked with my mother and I asked her about it. Was this so? And she said, yes, it is. She said, everything that's born will die. Which, it's extraordinary because I think it's the kind of, the classic thing that the masters would say. But my mother just said it naturally. Everything that's born will die. Yeah. So this, and they could die any time, was my interpretation of it.
So you had a lot of fear. You started to have a lot of fear around that.
Around that, I did have fear around
and
it.
And that eventually became your driving force.
Yeah.
To seek answers.
Yeah. I could never, I just couldn't dismiss it ever. After that, of course, I began to see in my life plenty of evidence of people dying suddenly, or on the radio you hear of crashes and so on. Yeah. So what my mother had said, about everything that's born will die, and it could die any time. Yeah. There was evidence of that coming to me all the time. Now, once I was thinking about it all day, every day. I wasn't a miserable child or anything like that. I had, quite a good life. But this was running in the background always. Yeah. And I could never fully shut it out. I did try to for many long years and in many ways. But I used to think, well, what's it all about? Say later when I was working in a job and I'm working very hard and trying to get money together to get something. And I would think, well, what if I knew I was going to die tomorrow? Would I still keep working so hard today? Or
what would you do with your life?
What would you do? There was some kind of a fundamental conflict going on. And nobody had any answers and nobody was interested in talking about it either, I can tell you. People are not that happy with you bringing up conversations about death when you're in the middle of a party or whatever.
We actually see death as a failure.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the evidence kept coming up, as I said, all the time, and I couldn't deny it. So I started reading and stuff. I started reading philosophy and psychology.
So you were then, you told me earlier, you were a teacher in school. Yeah.
I after secondary school, I went to university and I studied science and maths, and I became a science teacher. Yeah. But I knew when I went to study science that I was trying to find out the secret of the world.
Right.
What was the secret of the world?
Yeah.
What made it go, and what, and really, in a way, I was trying to find out, this death problem. Yeah. That, I thought science would somehow be able to explain that to me, but I found pretty quickly that it didn't. However, I got a job out of it.
Yeah, so you started reading classics?
Yeah, and philosophy and psychology, a lot of psychology, that kind of thing. I tried reading various philosophy books. I didn't get a lot out of them because I wasn't able to understand them. but I was already then, you know, at some stage, maybe around the time I was 30, this new genre of self-help books began to appear. Yeah. Well, they made a lot of money out of me because every new book that came out, I thought this would surely explain something of, you know, this fundamental problem. Yeah. You know, by this stage, of course, I had realised that a lot of people, were suffering from some kind of fundamental unhappiness. Mm-hmm. And so this is why all these books were coming out, that I wasn't the only one going around with this worry or fear or whatever, you know, just dissatisfaction. And the thing was, on the surface, I had everything and I knew it. You know,
but you still had this nagging feeling.
It was always, it was there, you know,
right.
What's the matter with me? Why can't I just accept everything as it is? Why can't I just be happy with, I have everything that anybody could want. Yeah. But still, there was something in the background bothering me.
But you had everything you wanted, but you weren't happy.
That was it.
Yeah. And if you go out on the street and you ask people, everybody really, what are you looking for in life? Everybody would say the same.
Yeah.
I'm looking for happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you started reading all these self-help books.
Yeah.
And did you come closer?
I certainly, as I said, those kinds of books, I was attracted to books that were talking about this problem of unhappiness. Yeah. So along the way, I did get ideas and new questions came up, and I began to be able to question things and ask myself questions. Like I remember at one stage when I was a teacher, I must have been reading a book, I can't remember what it was, and the question of values came up. Mm-hmm. What do you value? Or what's worth valuing? Yes. And I thought about this, and somewhere in the book or in this idea was, you know, what values are you going to take into your life? I mean, consciously choose some value. And I decided at the time that I would choose the value of kindness. And this was actually very appropriate as a teacher because, you know, I'm a science teacher and a maths teacher, and lots of the kids, they just don't care about it. They don't like it. It isn't delightful or interesting for them. But they're stuck with having me as a teacher, and I'm stuck with having them in my class. And I thought, well, I don't want, you know, under those circumstances, what's a good way for me to treat them? What can I do? So I thought if I had the value of kindness, so no matter what was going on, say, academically between us, that at least I would treat a child with, you know, with kindness, and I would, you know, that I wouldn't be, and I mean, some of it was even to just not be unkind, not to make a flippant remark or a put-down remark casually, to be conscious of my words and to be sure that they were at least nice, that some child wouldn't go away hurt because they'd been overlooked or... So that was one of the things I got out of it. Yeah. And I actively took that on in my life, you know, that would be a value. So I got things like that, which I think were a move in a good direction. At least it was a move towards a degree of consciousness, I'd say.
But this was not your goal. Consciousness was not your goal.
Well, I didn't know about awakening or anything at that stage.
Yeah. So you said... I was reading somewhere on your website or somewhere, your biography, you had 30 years of searching.
Yeah.
It was 30 years of searching on a psychological path.
I'd say between about 20 and 50. The ages of 20, we'll say. Yeah. I mean, even though as a teenager, I was already very interested in things like Shakespeare or, you know, the kind of literature, classical literature you studied in secondary school. Yeah. It was very moving for me and did give me the clue that there was something serious to be thought about and discussed. Yes. Although I would have thought, you know, at an intellectual or an abstract level. I mean, I hadn't figured out to bring it right into myself. Mm. And then in those years, we'll say between 20 and 50, trying to understand psychology or psychotherapy or trying to read... The self-help books then were beginning to bring it more personal. What can you do? What values can you choose? You know, so I was beginning to become more personal about the thing and trying to interpret things in relation to myself.
Yeah, during that time. It seems that you started to adjust certain things.
Yeah.
Or started to integrate in your life, like being kind, or
Yes,
I don't know
that kind of
what
thing.
else changed in your life through.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a
Reading
long,
that.
slow, gradual thing, I suppose. For instance, I at some stage remember reading and thinking about honesty and what did honesty mean.
Yeah.
And, could you be 100% honest all the time with everybody?
Yes.
And I came across a book written by, I think it was a Harvard University professor, and it was called Lying. And the whole book is about all the little ways in which we're dishonest with each other. And you can't really be totally honest with the world. And I would even question if it's, even worthwhile. I mean, you're not going to walk up to somebody, you notice that they're, what we'll say, very heavy or something, and say something to them about it. So
You get sued in America if
well,
you say that.
yeah, but I mean, it just isn't appropriate anyway, because while that might be practicing honesty, it's also very unkind. So do you see where conflicts of values would come in?
Right.
But I did decide for myself that it would be very important for me I call it to keep myself mentally clean. And it would be things like, say for instance, if I went into a shop and the person in the shop gave me too much change, that, if I noticed this, I don't usually notice, I tend to put it straight in my pocket, but if I noticed it, I mean, I could easily put it in my pocket, walk out, and there's not going to be no repercussions from anybody. But for my own self, it was important that if I noticed anything like that I would be totally honest. To keep my own mentality or myself clean. And it maybe is something to do with guilt, to not create any situations that might afterwards produce guilt. So there was a certain taking of responsibility for myself. Now, I wasn't in any way thinking that anybody else should do this or anything. This was me taking responsibility for myself, that I felt this was an important value. Getting away with it didn't matter. It was keeping myself clear and clean. Again, I mean, Shakespeare said, suspicion haunts the guilty mind. And so not having a guilty mind removes all suspicion. Which gives for a great sense of cleanliness and contentment, and those kinds of things helped.
So at what point did you become aware there is actually not only a psychological path but also a spiritual path? What was the shift?
Yeah.
What happened?
When the shift happened in a way that was very clear to me in 2003. My first boyfriend when I was a teenager, his name was Richard Rose. And my mother had died earlier in the year. And this is my hometown where I was born and raised. And he didn't come to the funeral. And he had been to my father's funeral a couple of years before. And I didn't notice at the time, but a few months later, I thought, gee, Richard didn't come. I wonder if he's okay, because he had told me he was having health problems. And I wondered, gosh, there's nobody who would tell me now if he died. So I Googled his name. And I didn't get anything about him.
You said...
But I got this Richard Rose, Zen master, in West Virginia in the United States. And when I looked at this website and started reading it, something really happened to me. I mean, it was like I just became clear and alert and right there. And I was like, what is this? And I would read the sentences. And I would understand every single word, but I would still think, but I don't get what he's saying. So, of course, this, I suppose I thought, well, I'm going to challenge this. I should be able to understand any English sentence if I know all the words. So the next day I went back to the website, and for the next 18 months, I went to that website, and there were a lot of websites linked to it, and I started reading this kind of stuff. And I was just utterly amazed, because they were talking exactly about the kind of things that really interested me. And gradually I began to understand what they were saying. So that was really when I really began to get focused and get clear. There is such a thing as an end to this suffering and to this anxiety and this whatever. Yeah. There is an end to it. And that was a new thing for me, because I just thought I'd go on for the rest of my life trying to be as good as I could. And that was just, the deck of cards I got, and be happy with them. But here was a group that were saying, no, there is an end to this. There is a way to come to the end of psychological suffering.
It's interesting because a lot of people say there's nothing you can do.
Yeah. I would have thought that.
Well, there was something prior to that. I think, again, I saw on the interview that you did with is it
Tash, T-A-T,
yeah.
Tash.
You made this little diagram of two mountains.
Yes.
One was a hill and one was
Yeah.
a bigger mountain. And then you found this article from Teresa from Avila, and she
Yes.
said, right here in the middle,
Right.
is hardly anybody to get across. And the
Yes.
reason for that is, would you like to pick up?
Yeah.
And tell me.
I'll tell you the name of the mountain. The name of the mountain is Croagh-Patrick, and I was born and raised at the foot of it, about a mile from it. It's a very famous pilgrimage mountain.
Yes.
It was a place of pilgrimage from the Druids a couple of thousand years ago, and when Catholicism or Christianity came to Ireland, this pilgrimage site was taken over by the Christian movement or by Catholics. And to this day, it's the last weekend of July, there's a big pilgrimage up there. But as I showed you in the thing, the shape of the mountain is, it's lower and long like this, and then it takes a curve and it goes straight up. It's a volcanic mountain.
Yeah.
And I had read an article about Teresa of Avila. Now, according to Teresa's system, there are 7 steps in spiritual awakening. And she was a spiritual director. And somebody asked her towards the end of her life, what was the biggest obstacle that people encountered in spiritual development? And she said that according to her system, that stage 4 was the single biggest obstacle. That everybody that came to the convent, they got through stages 1, 2 and 3, which I likened to the lower part of the mountain. And stage 4 is when it changes from being this shape to going up. And there's 3 steps up there. And she said if people got across that 4th step, they had no problem getting the rest of the way, getting to the top. And when she was asked, well, what exactly is the obstacle? And what she said was, if I could get people past self-esteem. So these 2 ideas of the mountain and this came into my head, happened to come into my head at the same time, which is why I talked like that. But when that came up for me, I thought then, so self-esteem. So there's something past self-esteem. I couldn't figure out what it was. There were no thoughts or no ideas coming to mind. So I thought the best thing I could do was start making a list of all the qualities of self-esteem that I had. And there would be things like, I'm well educated, that gives you a certain level. I'm a mother, you get a certain amount of status with having children, and just all the different qualities that we all know from a psychological level.
So there's also another side, a low self-esteem.
Yes,
There's
but
a high
it's
self-esteem and a low.
But there's still self-esteem.
Yes.
There's still
that
self-esteem.
Is the way you see yourself.
Yeah, that's right. It's how you see yourself, and how. Then I asked the question. Well, why do I see myself like this? Yeah. And I see myself like this because of what the rest of the world has told me. My teachers told me, you're quite good in school, other people told me, you have a nice personality, we get on with you, so you have friends. Other people say, you made an awful mess of your career, you didn't make a lot of money, so you don't feel so good in that. Mm-hmm. So it's the full collection of these messages that I got from the rest of the world are what make up self-esteem.
So we could say your programs, our programs.
Yeah, all of our programs.
Yes.
But we got them from outside.
Yes, and we started believing in them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we started adding to them, and you have low self-esteem about something and somebody says something and it goes even lower.
Yes.
And so they're basically all beliefs.
Yeah.
I think I'm like this. I believe myself to be like this because this is what everybody's been telling me. And, and along the way, it gets tweaked and changed a bit. Being a 60-year-old woman, the world treats you quite differently from being a 20-year-old. So it gets tweaked along the way to accommodate these changes. Mm-hmm. But what Teresa was saying is there's getting people beyond that. And I just was going around baffled. Get beyond it. What could there be beyond self-esteem? I wasn't getting anywhere with it. And then I remembered during this, there was a couple of days on which, this was just going on in my head, and I would think about it, and anything that came up, I would be checking this idea with it. Would I get any clues as to what was beyond self-esteem? And I remembered one day then that when I was a kid, my mother used to say, I consider all of you to be God's gift to us. And this is now a small farm, with a woman with 9 children, and there's new babies arriving all the time. And, you are God's gift. And I remember the feeling of her saying that. I'm really precious. They consider me a gift from God. I mean, I'm beyond anything that they themselves could have created. And when my own children were born, I really did feel that they were gifts from heaven or something like that. They were beyond anything. So that feeling was renewed in me as a mother, with just the mystery. It was just a fabulous mystery that these little babies and little people would come into my life. And so I started thinking then, well, maybe, what if I am a child of God, a divine child? I mean, I don't know what language to use, but what if it is that what I'm really created from is something other than this world, that there is something else there? And then I thought, well, if I'm a divine child, so are you, and you. So everybody so I'm not special in being a divine child. I am special in being a divine child, but everybody else also has this specialness. So what happened was judgment just fell away. I mean, how can I be criticizing a divine creation? Who am I to be finding fault with something that's a divine creation? It's not my business to know why that creation was created or its purpose or anything in itself. And
it's a huge step.
It was a huge step in feeling. It was a huge step in feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like my face fell with, it was just, there was a real shift that happened there. And it was a feeling shift rather than a thinking shift. Because suddenly the world looked, it's peopled with divine creatures and, just animals and plants and everything created from something that I am also created from. And in a way, what cemented the idea for me was I was looking in my jewellery box one morning and there were 3 pieces of jewellery. And they must have been there for years and I never noticed this. And it just dawned on me. There's a brooch and there's a ring and I think it was a bracelet. And they're all made from gold. And I thought, their value is in their goldenness, not in the shape that they are, not in the form. I thought, so divinity is the same kind of thing. It's what we're created from. And the form, it can take any form. But gold itself doesn't disappear when it gets melted down and put into another shape. Mm-hmm. It's mutable or something like that. And so it was like that made it a concrete idea for me, this idea of something divine, which I can't see or feel or anything, but we all know it in ourselves. We know that there's something sacred in us, don't we? At some deep level, regardless of what the world says or...
Well, that's what we are looking for all the time. And we try
and
to
it's
find
covered
it in
up as the thing.
Out the world.
Yeah, we try to find it out in the world. And, well, Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you. Yeah. I mean, if I'm to take that statement clearly, and this would have been part of my reading, I suppose, at some stage, saying, well, what did he mean? I mean, he meant it. He wasn't saying it for no reason. Yeah. So if the kingdom of heaven is within me, I mean, how can I find it? How do I get there? And that kind of thinking and that kind of questioning is what got me on what I'll call self-inquiry. Looking into what am I or who am I or... I was trying to find the kingdom of heaven. Yeah. I thought if he said it... Plus the Buddha had said, what I teach is suffering and I teach the end of suffering. I would take that they're speaking about the same thing, the end of suffering and the kingdom of heaven. They're both trying to say the same thing. So if these great teachers, and not just them, I mean many hundreds of others have been saying this, there must be something to it. So when I came across Tet, And they said, yes, there is something to it. I mean, this is for sure, and many of us have found it, and you too can find it. It's available to everybody. It's your birthright.
But there was
And here's
something
how.
earlier which I just loved, when you discovered, or you inquired into, is there free will or is there not free will?
Yeah.
And again, that came from your Catholic background.
Yeah.
You worked with the phrase, thy will be done.
So I would have spent years coming across lots of phrases and reading them in an intellectual kind of way and getting a certain amount and just glossing over other things. So I would think that, that particular phrase, I had glossed over it a lot of times, seen it many times. I mean, it's quite a common phrase that people know. And then one day it struck me, well, what does this really mean? And I started looking for, well, what's my will and thy will? And I didn't have a clue as to what it was, but I thought if these two words are used, there must be a difference. So I thought I'll make a list of every kind of thing that's happening, events that are going on, and I'll kind of classify them as my will and thy will. So having made that decision and taken out my piece of paper, ready to start making notes, the phone rang. Do you want me to tell this story again?
Yes,
so the phone in the house rang, and I thought, okay, number one for the thy will. If the phone rings, because I hadn't done anything about that. So thy will, the phone rings. So I went to the phone and I answered it, and it was somebody, a friend, and we had a little chat, and she said, why don't you come for dinner, a couple of evenings' time and so on. And I'm there at the same time thinking, will I say yes or no, because is that my will or thy will? I was trying to, part of my mind must have been at the same time thinking, is which way will I answer? How will I know how to answer, whether it's my will or thy will? I was expecting a voice from heaven to shout from the corner. So nothing was happening. There was just silence. I said, oh, yeah, I'd love that. We'll come, whatever evening it is. So that's fine. Now, in the meantime, I was writing other things. But in a couple of evenings' time, we did go for dinner. And when we got there, they weren't all that welcoming, and they were just a little bit, oh yeah, so you guys decided to show up after all, or something. We're like, what's this? So I got in. It turned out that I had agreed, and they had invited us to come for dinner for 7 o'clock, and we arrived at almost 8 o'clock. In my head, it was almost 8 o'clock. So I was, my will, thy will, there's something going on here about my will and thy will. So the thy will was that there was, this is how I figured it out in my head. The thy will was that there was a misunderstanding. And the my will was that I didn't want there to be a misunderstanding. I didn't like that happened. So then I asked the question, well, how will I know when there's my will and thy will? And over a little bit of time, what I found was every time things went wrong, according to Tess, that was my will. Every time there was resistance. So I became a bit smarter, without having to go headlong into my will. When things were going against what I wanted, or my desires were not being met, or my wishes not being fulfilled, I began to think, oh, that's my will in operation. Okay, now the advice is not my will, but thine. So another way you could put it, or oftentimes religiously it might be put, to surrender to what is, to accept what is.
But also, what needs to come in is trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also trust in thy will, that this is the right, no matter how it looks.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I had to get an idea what thy will was and my will.
Yeah.
I found, now remember I said from Teresa, that was step 4, and there were 3 other steps after that.
On the spiritual path.
On the spiritual path,
yes.
up the side of the mountain.
Yeah.
What happened after I became aware of my will and thy will, and when my will was wanting its own way and so on, other things began to emerge. Like at some point I came across, what was it, me taking credit for things, that I had done that, and realised actually that was pride. Or just not being grateful for things. So the following 3 steps, what would happen as I was doing this investigation, something would come up and I would look at it. I had gotten in the habit of looking at things with myself. I think that's the crucial thing, to start looking at what's going on with yourself. And then I would find, the exact one you said about trust, I remember one day thinking about, well, what do I really trust? Do I trust that there'll always be money in the bank to pay the bills? Do I trust that my children will continue to do well? Do I trust that my own health will hold up? And at some point it turned to me when the question was, where could I put my trust? I mean, could I trust any of these things? And again, it struck me that maybe the message was, put your trust in the divine. Put your trust in God. And while I didn't feel it, I just, when I thought that, I thought, okay, I'm going to put my trust in you now, Goddess. Or God, because I don't know what else to do with it. I don't feel it awfully confidently or anything, but I'm going to do that and I'm going to try. And give me a hand with it here. And the thing is, you see, things then would emerge that would give you opportunities to reaffirm that you had made that practice. Yeah. The opportunities that come up, and I would see them through that filter of, well, I did say I would try to trust, and I will try to trust here. Now, I think sometimes people maybe have the idea that if you're trusting, that you become passive. Well, there's no conflict at all between being trusting and being fully active in your life. But I think sometimes for people, they might feel conflicts like that would come up for them intellectually. Does that explain? Does that give you an idea of what? Yeah.
But as I'm listening to you, I just one thing comes so strong from your story is how you took the time to attend to yourself. It's like almost consciousness was attending to itself, and you took the time to inquire into things and to find out. And it seems like you never had to rush through life. You never had stress in your life. You had the space and the time to attend to yourself.
Yeah.
Is this how you see that today?
Yes and no. Yeah. Once I got in contact with TET, my group, and I began to get began to read books, and I began to hear things, and they were about, we'll say, self-inquiry. I really began to get some ideas at that stage about how I might do this and to personalise it. And I had to do this for myself. I was fully responsible in doing this. So I would, maybe read a little bit, say in the morning or any time, whenever I had time. I was never very disciplined about anything. But I would be standing at the kitchen sink washing the dishes when I might think about something like trust, or I might think about my will and thy will. I might be vacuuming the house and I'd be thinking about something like this. So it came and went in between normal life. I mean, and the thing is, we all have moments in our life, when we go to the bathroom or when we're driving the car or whatever, when we do have plenty of time to think about things. And
it's more like contemplating things.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say that, 10 years before that, I mean, what would I have been thinking about? I might have been thinking, I'm going to go down to the shop now, and what am I going to get? And so on. So I would have been putting my focus on the outside world and managing it. Yeah. And now I began to have the idea of focusing within myself. Yes. Now, there was plenty of time also to do the outside things. Yeah. So you actually don't need a lot of time. It's more that you need to get the idea that it's really important for you to look within yourself. It's well worth your while. What's to be found is the kingdom of heaven. Nobody can find it for you. So you're 100% responsible for doing this for yourself. And once you get the idea that it's a goal that's really important, and I would think that I can't imagine anybody who wouldn't be able to fit in times to think about it and to maybe read a little bit or anything. I continued my normal life. I wasn't a good meditator. I wasn't a disciplined personality. So I didn't do that a lot. I mean, a lot of people maybe take some half an hour out every day and meditate, and maybe this is consciously what they're looking at. But I would say that you can fit it into your normal life. Nobody need know a thing about it.
It needs to be a priority, then you find the
Yes,
time.
you need to have, I think the first step is for somebody to realise there really is an end to suffering. There really is a purpose to my life. It's mine, and I have to find it. Other people are saying that they have found it, and maybe I can trust them. Maybe if somebody has the good luck of coming across people who have found this, and one finds them trustworthy, and then you begin to take that journey on for yourself. Nobody else can do it for you. They can maybe give you some hints or tell you how they did it, and then you do your version of it, according to your personality and according to your circumstances and time. But it can go right along, right in the middle of normal daily life.
So what do you think about following a teaching, which was somebody else's path?
Yeah.
Do you think that would work for somebody else?
It was very helpful to me when I came across the Richard Rose teachings, because he wrote 3 or 4 books. And when I read them, I felt there to be something very pure about them. Now, I didn't understand a lot of them. He used phrases and so on that, backing away from untruth. Well, I didn't know what untruth was. I couldn't identify untruth so that I could back away from it, that kind of thing. But then in meeting some of his students, I went twice to the States for 2 weekends. And listening to them, I began to get a much clearer idea of what that was. And it's what I would call self-inquiry, which is generating questions for yourself. Like you might ask yourself. I mean, one of the things I did one time was, I thought, now, what's this thing of liking people and not liking people? I know that there are some people I like and some that I don't. So what is this in me that chooses to like or not like? And do I have any control over it? Or question. What?
Yeah.
I mean, am I just a victim of liking or not liking, or do I have any control over it? So like that, I took out my piece of paper and I wrote down the names of 3 people that I thought, honestly, I liked. And I looked at that and I thought, well, now, is this a feeling? And what is the feeling? Are these people I enjoy their company because there's energizing conversation, or because I feel not judged by them, there's a warmness or a tolerance about them? So I wrote down characteristics like that, whatever list I got between the 3 of them. Then I picked out 3 people that I really didn't like and wrote down things. Well, what I don't like is I don't like being judged. I don't like them because they don't like me. And of course, the same would have happened to like, and you think, well, is there nothing more to it? Are we nothing more than just one mirror reflecting the other? Do I find them, I don't like them because they're boring. What does it mean if somebody is boring? And then having got this bit of information from out there, I started looking at me, looking within as to how I came up with these ideas or whatever, what was causing this filter of liking and disliking. And of course, what I found was it was beliefs, our assumptions, our expectations, our needs that I had. I liked people that entertained me. I didn't like people that bored me, but that's my problem. I was projecting onto them something about, I mean, if I'm spending time with you, you're supposed to be entertaining me. I mean, talk about total selfishness, but I wasn't aware of it. So what it is, it's about bringing what's unconscious into consciousness. Yes. And that's what beliefs and assumptions are. We're all full of beliefs and assumptions from way back when we're children or from our culture. And for the most part, we don't look at them. And people are afraid to look at them, actually, because if you look inside yourself and you think, I'll write down the names of the 3 people I like most, it would be very inconvenient for you to find maybe that you didn't like one of your children. I mean, so you have to be totally honest to yourself. So there's no point in doing it at all if you're not going to be totally self-honest. But the thing is, I thought, okay, so what if I find something like this, if I come across it, what do I do now? And then what came to me was, you don't act on it. You still treat a person exactly as is appropriate. Yes. And you don't tell anybody. It's nobody else's business. This is a very personal journey, a very personal adventure. You must be able to be completely honest, which is why you mustn't tell other people about it. Because the minute you start to tell somebody else, a little bit of guilt or a little bit of shame or something will come in. I can't believe I feel like this about somebody. And what if you find you like somebody better than your own husband? Do you know, I mean, if you're honest with yourself and find this, it's kind of like dangerous information, we think. But it's not if you fit in the piece of you still behave absolutely appropriately as you always did.
Yes, yes.
But now you know something about yourself.
Yeah, you somehow bring your unconscious into conscious.
To yourself, yourself, purely for yourself. You don't have to justify it to anybody or tell it to anybody, but you're on the path of finding yourself, getting to know yourself. So it does take a bit of courage.
It takes a lot of courage.
Well, I don't really. The adventure is so interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, what a shame to live your whole life without knowing who you are.
Yes.
Especially when we have this opportunity to know who we truly are. But as I said, I would say the way to deal with the courage aspect is to take it as a completely private, personal business, that not to be shared with anybody. Now, I feel sure it would be safe, to share this maybe with a teacher who has been through this, because they know, and there's not going to be any element of judgment. But I just mean in your normal circle of life. Your spiritual path is yours, personally, and it's your responsibility, and you can't let anybody else stop you. I mean, we're so entangled with other people that we feel we're letting them down if we do something that's really important to us. But the thing is, the spiritual search is something you can do without letting anybody down in any way, or in any way changing any of your relationships with them.
So, as you were unraveling yourself, your unconscious, did your life change? Did people come up to you and say what's happening to you?
No, nobody ever noticed a thing.
That's interesting.
I would say things happened very gradually with me. I mean, at some point, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, I realised that I had become quite maybe eccentric in myself insofar as my values and beliefs. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be telling this to, or if I did, it would be in a conversational way, or be talking about the way we had changed over time, maybe with friends of our own age. So what I realised, I was no longer a mainstream kind of person, which I had been. Now, it happened gradually over time, so it didn't disturb anybody, and it didn't disturb me much either. It went along fine. I mean, there were things that surprised me about myself, but it was also, it's really an adventure. The adventure of yourself, it's the greatest adventure. And that all of us have the possibility of this truly great adventure for ourselves it's just awesome beyond words.
So you went, I think you lived for almost 8 years in America.
Yes.
And you did that to be close to the school, or what was the reason?
No, when I lived in the States, it was from 1986 to 94, long before I ever heard of Tess. Right. I was teaching in a school there, and I did go to workshops of different kinds, maybe did yoga, did some meditation things, got into a 12-step group for a while, and I learned something from all of them. I went to therapy a lot. When my marriage broke up when I was about 30, I mean, it was the single worst thing that happened in my life. It was devastating. I mean, I lived in a country where there was a ban on divorce. Not just that there was no divorce, there was actually a ban on it. So the concept of a broken marriage, I mean, you really had no options after that. And, it was just devastating. It was devastating for my ex-husband, and it was devastating for my children and for all of our families. So when I went to the States, I started going to therapy. We didn't have much therapy in Ireland at that stage, around the early 80s. Yeah. Mainly what I wanted to find out was what had gone wrong in this relationship. Because we had been madly in love. We went to college when we were 18, married as soon as we left college, and we were madly in love. And 10 years later, we didn't have 2 words to say to each other. So I really wanted to know what had happened. How could this have happened? I just had no understanding at all. So during these years of therapy and counselling, questions were asked, and I got to look at questions in myself. So in a way, I guess, self-inquiry started by new ideas being brought up to me, and maybe being introduced to different kind of literature. So that really helped.
So let's focus on the big event,
okay.
Which was in the year 2010.
Yeah.
You went onto a solitary retreat. Was this, no, the year 2009, somebody gave you a birthday present, and you went on this retreat.
Yes.
And then you came back, and you went back.
Yeah.
And on the last day of the retreat, what happened?
Well, what you just said it there, something about this big event. Well, it's a non-event. This is the.
But that's what they all say.
I know.
We work all our life towards this event, and
it's a non-event. It really. I mean, I have to say that because, it's difficult to talk about it. But what happened in my case was, all week long there had been things happening. Like I thought there were things in front of my eyes, and at one stage the whole world went completely silent, and there was just silence, maybe for, I don't know, 30 seconds or a minute. So there were things happening, and I just thought, my eyes, must get them tested when I go home, and so on. So on the night, packed up, ready to go home from the retreat, and I sat into bed, and as I sat into bed, turned off the lights. I was way out in a rural area, and I was going to look at the windows to see where the curtains pulled or whatever, and there was a light over this side of the room. I thought, what's that? And then I looked at the thing again, and the light came closer. And I still looked away. I mean, I don't know why or how, but I know I did. I'm checking on the curtains, whatever about you. This sounds extraordinary. And then it came right up. It came right up into me. Right up here, and inside there were, I don't know whether it was people or what, but they were inviting me in. But it wasn't just an invitation like, would you like to come in? It was an invitation that I could not refuse. So I went in, and I don't know what happened then, but I'm sitting up in bed, and there's a vision, we'll call it, going on at the end of the bed. And I knew when this happened, I knew I had found what I was looking for. I think as soon as the light came, or something. At some point, I was totally overwhelmed or overcome by, this is what I have been looking for all my life. And I'd say my shoulders fell. I was like, oh, the relief of the world.
So what actually was it?
Well, it was a vision. All I can say was there's an outpouring of creativity. Just an outpouring of visual creativity. And I knew what it was, and I recognised it, and I knew it was what I had been before I was born into a body, and what I will go back into after I leave a body. And I knew this. Now, nobody told me, there were no words, anything, but I just knew this.
So you say, I knew?
I knew.
And I knew that I knew.
Yeah. It was just...
So this huge
relief
fell off your shoulder. Yeah.
Just relief.
The world, what was it which fell off?
I don't know what it was. I suppose that all one's life, one is maintaining themselves. There's a certain energy or restriction or something, holding yourself together or keeping it all going or something, and it just went. Just like, whew. You know the way you can't say to somebody who's uptight, relax. Well, something happened, and relax.
Yeah.
And that relaxation has remained. And security. A sense of security.
So, if somebody would ask you now, well, who are you? What would you say?
Oh, I know people always say that. I am, is all I can say.
Yeah.
I am.
But that's beautiful enough.
And that's enough when you know that. To know that you are eternally. And I suppose the test, the body that's sitting here and the voice and everything that's talking to you, that's just the instrument through which the I am functions in the world. And in some ways, I am much more me than I used to be. Even though I'm not here at all, I'm much more me in that I'm much freer and relaxed and just able. I'm not trying to hold back anything from anybody, trying to be proper or trying to, whatever the things one would always be trying to, some awareness of one's image. It's just gone. And it's totally natural. And I used to hear about this before this happened to me. And I used to look at them, but you look quite normal, So I don't think an outside person can't see what's happening within one, what has happened. And it's a transformation of consciousness. What one is as consciousness is different. Much more spacious, open, yeah, I don't know what else to say.
So would you say that everything you did till that point, like your whole psychological path, your spiritual path, made that moment happen? Or did that moment happen despite of all that? Did it happen
I don't
because
know.
of grace?
Definitely. I mean, I did not do that moment.
Yeah.
Do you know, I didn't, I had nothing to do with it.
Somehow it sounds like something was preparing itself for this moment.
Very much. I very much felt that for 3 years.
Yeah.
That it was like being let know you're pregnant.
Yeah.
The universe is pregnant with you, and it will play out in its own time.
Yeah.
In the same way, once one is pregnant, it will carry on at its own. You have nothing to do with it really once it's started.
Yes.
And I suppose I would be inclined to say that all the things I were doing helped. Mm-hmm. You know, along the way they just gradually built up, and or rather the ego just got chipped away at, and you know, just from the various efforts and attempts.
And is the ego still sometimes present?
No.
How does one know that?
Well, I had read about this kind of stuff. I'd heard it. So when this happened to me, and I told you about that night, so then the vision faded, and I knew what had happened, and I was as light as air, and I turned over in my bed and I went to sleep. Slept perfectly, no dreams, anything, for about 8 hours. And I'm up the next morning, and I'm standing in the kitchen, and I'm making tea for myself. And I think, everything is so spacious. I mean, what is this? Like, this little tiny kitchen, it's so bright and spacious, and there's something missing. I don't know what is it, and I kind of ran around. I was leaving to go home, so to make sure I had my case and everything. I'm outside, and I thought, I'll look inside to see what's missing. Can I figure out what's gone? And I just nearly threw up. There I did that for a few times over the next week. I mean, there was something gone, but I couldn't remember what it was that had gone. And I couldn't remember anything about it, but there was something gone. Yeah. So maybe over a space of a week or two, I tried a few times to look inside. Mm-hmm. And each time the reaction was just one of nausea, so I stopped it. And then, I think it was maybe after Christmas or around Christmas, I had a book on my shelf called The Experience of No Self. By Bernadette Roberts. Yes. Now, but in the meantime, and I did have Art Tickner, my teacher from TAT, and I would be able to ask him, and I would say things, and he would say things back to me, but I still didn't really get it, that what had gone was the ego. I suppose I didn't. You see, I had no idea what it would be like. And it took me a while to put the two... My mind wasn't functioning very well at that time. It took me a while to put the two things together. And I started reading her book, and I thought, oh, yeah, that's what's gone. And it kind of amazed me that I had read so much about this, and yet when it happened, I didn't put the two together for quite a while. Yeah. Wow. Because it seems to me that the personality remained exactly as it always had been. Yes. You know, it didn't improve or anything.
So the personality is how you move and
how you talk and the kind of things you talk about and the kind of things you like and don't. And I thought that the ego and the personality were the same, but they're definitely different. But I've not, and I often look to see how are they different. But you see, I can't remember what the ego was like, so I can't figure. But
it shows how insignificant the ego can be.
Yeah, but it was nice. But I see it in other people speaking to me, and I see how domineering it is, and what suffering it's causing them.
Yeah, if you believe in that, it's very domineering. Yeah.
You can. I mean, I can see it. You know, people say things. I can see what's happening. You know, and if there's any way and it's the cause of all the suffering. So if there's any way that you and I, with the work we're doing right now, can do anything to alleviate the suffering, or to even give people a hint that maybe there is something real that can be done about this. But you do have to take responsibility for yourself. And there is help if you're willing to do that. Yeah.
What a beautiful story.
Thank you.
So Renate. Now you live, you told me earlier your husband has cancer.
Yeah.
And you live quietly at home.
Quiet life at home, take care of my husband.
Yes.
My delightful husband.
Yes.
And I got a website up about a month ago, tesshughes.com. And so I'm just learning how to manage it technically. And, you know, when somebody asks me a question, I might write a little article and put it up on it. So hopefully I'll be able to put some teaching or put some, maybe some useful thoughts out on it that maybe I've helped to anybody or of use to them or even of interest. Because that's how I got, I mean, the internet, I think the internet is complete magic. The internet is how I came across the group that I was helped by. And I was, you know, nearly 2 years reading their websites and their links and all the rest before I ever got in contact with them. But I was getting ideas, and a new thing had come into my life by coming across that.
Would you say that life has still some challenges for you?
Oh, yeah, life will always have challenges. I mean, awakening doesn't spare you from any of the rough and tumble of life. I think what does happen, though, is you're no longer confused about the tragedy being you. Or, you know, whatever is going on. It's just it's like it's the movie.
Yes.
And that's what's going on. It might be painful. I mean, you know yourself, you're watching a movie and tears will come over poignant things. It's the same. But you no longer think you're the character that's going to get, you know, mowed down or something. There's also great humour. This is one of the things that was a surprise to me. I call it divine humour. I just think divinity has a great sense of humour in its own way.
Well, I'm sorry, Tess, we have to stop.
Okay.
But I wrote down here, you were saying one day we will all return to true nature.
Oh, yes.
Gives us all hope.
Yes, there's no other way.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, we are in true nature, but
you're true nature.
We don't know that.
And if the thing is, if one can return to that or find that while they're still in a body and before they're faced with physical death, it makes it much easier for them.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming, Tess.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
To share with us this courageous path.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Conscious TV. Bye-bye.